The Galactic Empire stretched across thousands of star systems, a vast machine of power and control that had stood unbroken for 10,000 years. To most of the galaxy, the Empire was more than just a government. It was a force of nature, a presence as eternal as the stars themselves. Worlds obeyed its laws not because they wished to, but because resistance was a death sentence. No fleet had ever stood against them and lived. No rebellion had lasted longer than a single season before it was burned away by fire and steel. Entire civilizations were erased for daring to defy the Emperor's will. The galaxy had long ago accepted a cruel truth: there was no one left strong enough to challenge the Empire. But all of that began to change with a signal, faint and strange, carried through the silence of the void from a small blue world at the edge of an unimportant spiral arm. A world called Earth. At first, the signal was dismissed as background noise, just another transmission from some primitive society too far away to matter. But when Imperial analysts decoded the stream, they found something that froze them. These were not songs or greetings or messages of culture. They were blueprints. Human scientists had sent data through the stars, designs of ships, weapons, engines unlike any seen before. To the analysts, it looked like madness. The humans had not introduced themselves with words of peace or trade. They had introduced themselves with the language of war. The Empire's first response was laughter. It seemed impossible that a planet so small, barely noticed on star charts, could believe it was ready to stand before the most powerful military the universe had ever known. The Court of Admirals called the humans arrogant children, playing at warfare without knowing what true power looked like. And yet, there was unease, a whisper in the back of their minds, because something about those designs felt different. Brutal. Efficient. Ruthless. To test this strange world, the Empire dispatched a scout fleet, 50 warships, sleek and unstoppable by any known standard. Their orders were simple: appear in orbit above Earth, demand surrender, and burn a city to ash if the humans hesitated. This had been the Imperial way for centuries. No world had ever dared resist after such a demonstration. But when the fleet arrived in the Sol system, something happened that no one expected. The humans answered. Their transmission came not from a frightened leader or desperate council, but from a single voice, calm and steady, carrying across the dark. The Empire demanded their obedience. The human voice gave only 7 words in return: "If you come, you will not return." The commander of the fleet laughed when he heard it. He thought it was bravado, a desperate bluff from a race too ignorant to know better. Yet there was something unsettling about the tone. No fear, no hesitation, only certainty. Still, the fleet advanced, crossing the gulf of space until Earth hung before them like a jewel of blue and white. As their weapons locked onto cities, they waited for panic. Instead, the human voice returned once more, sharper this time, as if it were a final warning. "This is your last chance. Leave." For the first time in his career, the Imperial commander felt the faint touch of doubt. But he brushed it away. He ordered his ships to power their weapons, to prepare the strike that would teach this upstart race its place. And that was the moment the stars seemed to split. Out of the blackness, from behind the curve of the moon and the shadow of Earth, human warships appeared. There were not many. A dozen, perhaps less. Their shapes were sharp and cold, built not for beauty but for killing. The commander sneered at the sight. 12 ships against 50? It would be a slaughter. Yet what followed would be remembered in whispers across the galaxy for centuries. The battle was short. Shockingly short. The humans did not fight like any other race the Empire had faced. Their weapons were not elegant beams of light or slow, majestic plasma bursts. They hurled dense metal slugs at near-relativistic speeds, each impact tearing through Imperial hulls as if they were paper. They unleashed swarms of machines, tiny, fast, guided by cold intelligence, that ripped through engines and reactors before vanishing again into the void. Within minutes, 3 Imperial ships were gone. Within 10, half the fleet was burning, their wreckage scattering across the orbit of Earth. Panic spread through the Empire's soldiers. Nothing in their training had prepared them for this. When the commander finally gave the order to retreat, it was too late. His own flagship cracked apart under a hail of kinetic fire, consumed by explosions that lit the void with terrible brilliance. Only a handful of ships managed to escape, jumping back into hyperspace with the desperate message of what they had seen. Their last transmissions carried a single truth: the humans had not been bluffing. Against all odds, against all logic, a tiny fleet from an insignificant planet had destroyed an Imperial armada. When the news reached the Empire's core worlds, disbelief turned to anger. The High Council claimed the reports were exaggerated, that survivors had been poisoned by shame and fear. But deep inside, in the hidden corridors of power, the truth was undeniable. A new force had risen in the galaxy, one that fought with a kind of ruthless efficiency no one had ever imagined. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Empire had met an enemy that did not tremble before its power. And in that moment, the seeds of fear were planted. Because if a tiny human fleet could shatter their invincibility once, what might they do next? The Galactic Empire was not used to humiliation. For 10,000 years, their fleets had crushed resistance wherever it appeared. The destruction of the scout fleet above Earth should have been impossible. And yet, a handful of human ships had turned Imperial warships into burning wrecks. Across the Empire's vast territories, whispers began to spread, rumors of a world that had defied the impossible, a world that fought back. The Emperor himself was furious. His word carried like thunder through the halls of power. The humans would not only be destroyed, they would be erased, their planet shattered, their name forgotten from history. To fail against Earth was to insult the very idea of Imperial supremacy. The Empire assembled a second fleet. Not 50 ships this time, but more than 1,000. Each vessel was armed with enough firepower to reduce continents to ash. They were commanded by Admiral Valen, a veteran of countless campaigns, a man known for his cold precision and merciless victories. When he received his orders, he did not hesitate. He told his officers the mission would be short, a matter of hours. The humans had been lucky once, perhaps even clever, but luck and cleverness could not stand against the raw weight of Imperial numbers. He promised his crew that by the end of the week, Earth would burn. When the fleet emerged from hyperspace on the edge of the Sol system, the officers were confident. 1,000 ships stretched across the void like an endless wall of steel. They expected terror, desperation, surrender. Instead, what they found unsettled them more than they could admit. In the darkness ahead, only a small formation waited. Not hundreds of ships. Not even dozens. Just 12 human warships, motionless, silent, hanging between Earth and the stars like hunters lying in wait. The Imperial captains scoffed. 12 against 1,000? Madness. Admiral Valen himself smirked, but in the quiet of his mind, he felt something he had not known in years: unease. The humans had not run. They had not hidden. They had chosen to stand. The humans gave no words of negotiation, no pleas, no surrender. Their message was short and simple: leave now, or none of you will return. The words were cold, delivered with the same terrifying certainty as before. It was not arrogance. It was not desperation. It was a promise. Admiral Valen ordered the attack. 1,000 ships lit the void with fire as plasma cannons roared and beams of energy cut through the dark. The sky around Earth turned into a storm of death, and for a moment, the humans seemed lost inside it. But then they moved. The small fleet broke apart like shards of glass, each ship accelerating with impossible speed, weaving between the burning beams. They did not fire back immediately. They studied, they calculated, and when they struck, the galaxy itself seemed to tremble. Human weapons tore through Imperial defenses as if they had been designed to kill nothing else. Dense metal projectiles, invisible until the instant of impact, smashed through hulls and detonated reactors. Clouds of drones swarmed like insects, slipping past shields and carving into engines with surgical precision. Imperial ships exploded one by one, their deaths so sudden that commanders barely had time to react. The size of the fleet mattered less and less as panic grew. For every human warship, 10 Imperial vessels fell. The Empire had never seen such efficiency, such ruthless focus. Human tactics were brutal and alien. They did not waste shots. They did not spread fire across random targets. Each move was cold, precise, a lesson in survival carved into every attack. Imperial officers realized with horror that the humans were not fighting for conquest, not for glory, but as if every battle were a fight for existence itself. Within the first hour, 100 Imperial ships had been destroyed. Within 2, the fleet was breaking. Discipline collapsed. Admirals screamed for order as captains abandoned formation, retreating into chaos. But the humans pursued without hesitation, striking like predators that had caught the scent of blood. Even when outnumbered 100 to 1, they pressed forward. They had no fear of death, only the calm certainty of their mission. Admiral Valen watched the battle unravel and felt the unthinkable: fear. This was not war as he knew it. The humans fought differently than any species he had faced. The Empire's strength was overwhelming numbers, overwhelming firepower, overwhelming fear. But the humans seemed immune to it. They fought not as if they believed they might win, but as if they already knew the outcome. He could not understand it. It was madness. It was terror. It was something beyond reason. By the time Valen gave the order to retreat, it was too late. The humans had already locked onto his flagship. A storm of kinetic fire ripped across its shields, tearing through layers of armor until the great vessel cracked apart. As his ship burned, Valen stared into the void and saw the human fleet, still intact, still advancing, their weapons glowing with silent promise. His last thought before the fire consumed him was not of the Emperor or the Empire but of the cold human voice that had warned him. If you come, you will not return. Only a fraction of the 1,000 ships survived, fleeing into hyperspace with broken hulls and shattered morale. Their transmissions carried across the galaxy, desperate, panicked, almost incoherent. They spoke of impossible weapons, unstoppable tactics, a tiny fleet that fought like an entire empire. The Empire had never known such defeat. For the first time in its long history, it had faced an enemy that did not bend, did not break, and did not fear its power. Across the galaxy, the story spread. On worlds bound in chains, whispers turned to hope. If a small planet like Earth could resist, perhaps others could too. If a tiny human fleet could shatter 1,000 warships, then maybe the Empire was not eternal after all. But within the Imperial Palace, rage boiled like fire. The Emperor swore vengeance, swore that the humans would be crushed beneath the full weight of his power. Yet beneath his fury, even he could not silence the shadow that now haunted every corner of the galaxy. A single terrifying thought. The humans were not supposed to win. And yet they had. The Empire had never known silence like this. Across the command halls of distant starbases, in the endless chambers of the Imperial Palace, and within the hidden bunkers of the Admiralty, the defeat at Earth hung in the air like poison. No one dared to speak of it openly, yet no one could ignore it. 1,000 warships had been reduced to wreckage. Admiral Valen, who had once been a name spoken with respect and fear, was gone. His fleet had been destroyed by a force so small it should not have been possible. 12 human ships had stood against the fury of the Empire, and the Empire had lost. At first, the news was dismissed as lies. Survivors were accused of cowardice, their reports buried under accusations of panic and exaggeration. But the evidence could not be hidden. Black boxes recovered from wrecks, data bursts intercepted before destruction, and the sheer number of ships that had failed to return, all of it painted the same picture. The humans had fought, and the Empire had been broken. Denial gave way to anger. Anger gave way to something far worse: fear. Whispers began in the outer colonies. People spoke in hushed voices of Earth, of a planet so small it barely marked the star maps, yet strong enough to challenge the mighty Empire. On enslaved worlds, hope began to flicker in the hearts of the oppressed. If Earth could resist, maybe they could too. The thought spread faster than Imperial censors could silence it. In the markets of alien cities, in the back alleys of mining colonies, in the war camps of half-subjugated species, the words were the same: the humans fought the Empire and survived. The Admiralty scrambled to explain the defeats. They claimed the humans had discovered some stolen technology, that their weapons were only tricks and would soon be countered. They assured the galaxy that the Empire's power remained unshaken, that the next campaign would be decisive. But even as they spoke, their voices trembled. For inside the highest levels of command, they knew the truth. The humans had not fought with stolen weapons. They had fought with designs of their own making, tools of war so efficient, so cold, that the Empire's massive fleets seemed clumsy by comparison. The survivors spoke of strange tactics. Human warships did not spread their fire across many targets but focused with relentless precision. They destroyed supply ships first, then communications, then engines, crippling their prey before tearing them apart. It was not war as the Empire knew it. It was dissection. It was surgery. And the humans fought without hesitation, without pause, as if they had rehearsed every second of the battle 1,000 times. They did not waste resources. They did not waste lives. Every shot counted, every movement was exact, and every death was planned. What terrified the Empire most was not only the weapons but the psychology of their enemy. The humans did not fight for conquest. They did not fight for territory. They fought like survivors, like a species that had been forced by history to crawl through fire, and in that fire they had learned to endure. The survivors of Valen's fleet swore that the humans fought as if extinction itself were behind them. That was why they did not break. That was why they did not fear. In the imperial palace, the emperor himself brooded in silence. For centuries, he had crushed rebellions with a wave of his hand, erased entire planets with the press of a button. He had believed his rule eternal. But the reports from Earth gnawed at him. He demanded answers. How could such a small species wield such weapons? How could such a tiny fleet undo the work of 1,000? His scientists offered no comfort. Human technology was not magic. It was brutal simplicity refined to perfection. Where the Empire had relied on overwhelming size and firepower, the humans had chosen speed, efficiency, and precision. Their ships were smaller, but faster. Their weapons lacked elegance, but struck with devastating force. They had built war not as art, but as survival. The Emperor's rage turned cold. He declared that Earth would not only be destroyed, it would be erased so completely that no one would even remember its name. Preparations began for a new campaign, the largest in living memory. An armada that would blot out the stars, a hammer so massive that nothing could withstand it. Yet even as the Empire gathered its strength, fear continued to spread. On distant planets, slaves whispered of rebellion. Alien species that had endured centuries of chains now spoke the name of humanity with reverence. They are few, yet they fight. They are small, yet they endure. If they can stand, why not us? Rebellions flared in the shadows, small at first, then larger, fueled by the belief that the Empire was not invincible after all. The Admiralty tried to silence these sparks, but every act of suppression only made the fire stronger. Soldiers who had once marched without hesitation now hesitated at the thought of facing humans. The fear of defeat, once unimaginable, now lived in their hearts. In the great academies where young officers were trained, whispers ran through the halls. If the humans come, will we survive? The galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath. For millennia, the Empire had stood unchallenged. Now, in the far corner of the spiral arm, a new power had risen. A power that did not seek to conquer, but simply to resist. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. For if resistance was possible, then change was possible. And if change was possible, then the age of the Empire was nearing its end. Far from the palace, in the silence of deep space, the human fleet moved again. They did not celebrate their victories. They did not boast. They prepared. They knew the Empire would return, greater and stronger than before. But the humans had lived with threats of extinction before. They understood what the Empire had not yet realized, that survival was not measured by numbers or by size, but by will. And humanity's will had been forged in fire that no empire could comprehend. When the next battle came, the galaxy would witness it. And when they did, the whispers of fear within the Empire would grow into something far more dangerous. They would grow into rebellion. The galaxy had seen many wars before, but none like this. For centuries, the Empire's enemies had always been predictable. Rebels fighting for freedom, warlords hungry for power, or rival empires grasping for territory. They all fought the same way. They gathered fleets, they shouted defiance, and then they were broken beneath the Empire's endless strength. But the humans were different. They did not fight for conquest, nor did they fight for glory. They fought with the grim patience of a species that had always stood on the edge of extinction. And after 2 great victories, they did something no one expected. They attacked. The Emperor had sworn vengeance after the humiliation at Earth. He had ordered the construction of the largest armada in living memory, a fleet so vast it would eclipse entire star systems with its shadow. But while the Empire was gathering its strength, humanity struck first. Their fleet was still tiny, still laughably small compared to the Empire's vast power. Yet they did not wait for the storm to come. They became the storm. Imperial supply lines were the veins of the galaxy, carrying fuel, food, and weapons to every corner of the Empire's endless reach. For millennia, no enemy had dared touch them. To attack an Imperial convoy was suicide, punished by the swift arrival of fleets that could turn entire planets to ash. But in the cold silence of deep space, human warships appeared like phantoms. They did not seek battles they could not win. Instead, they struck where the Empire was weak, where no one expected resistance. A single human cruiser would appear from the void, unleash its weapons with merciless precision, and vanish before reinforcements could arrive. Convoys burned. Fuel depots exploded. Shipyards collapsed into twisted ruins. At first, the Empire believed these attacks were accidents, isolated incidents. But the pattern became clear. The humans were not fighting battles of pride or territory. They were cutting the Empire apart piece by piece. Every supply line destroyed meant fleets starved of fuel. Every shipyard burned meant replacements slowed. The Empire had always relied on overwhelming numbers, but now those numbers were bleeding. In the halls of the Admiralty, commanders raged at the audacity of it. They sent fleets to hunt the humans, but the humans were never where they were expected. They moved like shadows, striking and vanishing before the Empire could even react. To fight them was to fight smoke and fire, to grasp at nothing while your hands burned. On the worlds of the Outer Rim, enslaved species began to notice. They saw Imperial fleets withdrawing from their skies to defend convoys. They heard rumors of human ships tearing through supply lines with terrifying precision. And for the first time in generations, hope grew. The humans had not only survived the Empire's fury, they had forced the Empire onto the defensive. In the Imperial Palace, the Emperor grew restless. His armada was nearly complete, but it was bleeding before it could even leave its docks. Reports arrived daily of destroyed transports, lost fleets, crumbling shipyards. His rage was volcanic, yet even he could not ignore the truth. The humans were forcing him to fight on their terms. And worse, the galaxy was watching. For thousands of years, fear of the Empire had kept the galaxy silent. But now, in the corners of forgotten space, rebellions began to spark. Small uprisings at first, slaves refusing orders, miners sabotaging Imperial shipments, colonies refusing taxes. But they spread like wildfire. Each act of defiance carried the same message: if Earth can resist, so can we. Meanwhile, the human fleet refined its weapons. Each strike taught them more about the Empire's tactics, more about its weaknesses. They learned how to disrupt hyperspace jumps, how to cripple reactors with a single shot, how to use the Empire's size against itself. Their commanders spoke few words, but among their crews, a new saying was born: we cannot match their numbers, so we will take their heart. One of the most daring attacks came against the shipyards of Dravones, a world that had fed the Empire's fleets for centuries. A single human strike group descended upon it, outnumbered hundreds to one. But instead of meeting the Imperial defenders head-on, the humans targeted the reactors beneath the surface. Their weapons cut through the defenses with surgical strikes, igniting a chain reaction that tore the shipyards apart from within. The explosion lit the void like a second sun. Entire generations of Imperial warships were reduced to molten wreckage in a single night. The loss was catastrophic. The Empire could not replace its ships fast enough. For every vessel it built, the humans destroyed 2 more. For every fleet it launched, the humans starved it of supplies. And all the while, the humans grew bolder, pushing deeper into Imperial space, daring to strike ever closer to the core. Admirals who had once dismissed humanity as nothing more than insects now spoke of them with dread. Captains whispered warnings before every jump: do not underestimate them. Do not turn your back. The humans could be anywhere. It was fear unlike anything the Empire had ever known. The humans were not only winning, they were changing the very way the galaxy thought of war. But the cost was not only measured in ships and supplies. The Empire's grip on the galaxy was weakening. Rebellions grew stronger, fueled by the example of Earth. Species that had once cowered now stood with courage, believing that if the Empire could bleed, then perhaps it could die. What had once been whispers of defiance had grown into open flames. And everywhere, the name of humanity spread like wildfire. The Emperor, however, was not defeated. His rage had cooled into something far more dangerous: patience. He allowed the humans to strike, allowed them to grow bold, all while his armada grew in the shadows. His advisors begged him to unleash it immediately, to crush Earth before the rebellion spread too far. But the Emperor waited, watching, planning. He did not want merely to destroy the humans. He wanted to break them so completely that no species would ever dare follow their example again. Yet even in his cold calculations, a shadow lingered. The humans had already done the impossible twice. They had shattered fleets, ignited rebellion, and struck the heart of the Empire. He wondered, in the silence of his throne, if perhaps he was no longer the hunter, but the hunted. And in the depths of space, the human fleet prepared for what was to come. They knew the Empire would not rest until Earth was ash. They knew the storm was coming. But they also knew something the Empire did not. Numbers alone could not win this war. It was will, not size, that shaped the fate of galaxies. The turning tide had begun, and the Empire had already lost something far greater than ships or stations. It had lost its aura of invincibility. And once fear cracks, it never truly returns. The galaxy had never felt so unstable. For 10,000 years, the Empire had been the unshakable pillar of power, the eternal shadow over every world, every star, every life. But now that shadow was thinning. The defeats at Earth, the destruction of supply lines, the burning of Dravoni shipyards, all of it was spreading through the galaxy like cracks in glass. For the first time in living memory, the Empire's subjects began to believe the impossible. The throne was not eternal. On dozens of worlds, rebellion lit like fire in dry fields. On the planet Calthros, slaves who had once labored under imperial whips rose up in open defiance, chanting the name of humanity as they stormed their overseers' fortresses. On the mining moons of Xiron, workers refused shipments, armed themselves with stolen weapons, and declared their freedom. On entire sectors long forgotten by the Emperor's gaze, fleets painted human insignias on their hulls as symbols of resistance. If Earth can resist, so can we. It became not just a saying but a call to arms. The Admiralty responded with fury, sending fleets to crush each rebellion. And though they won many battles, the losses mounted. Every warship pulled from the front to deal with uprisings was another ship that could not hunt the humans. Every victory cost supplies that the Empire could no longer easily replace. And everywhere, rebellions returned even after being burned, fueled by the same simple truth: the Empire could bleed. Within the Imperial Palace, the Emperor's fury was a storm. He saw his great dominion shaking beneath him. He saw fear spreading through his officers, hesitation weakening his captains, and hope rising where once there had only been despair. He blamed it all on one world: Earth. Humanity. A single defiant race that had dared to stand against him. They were not just a military threat anymore. They were a symbol. And symbols were harder to destroy than fleets. Determined to crush that symbol, the Emperor ordered the largest counterattack yet. Dozens of fleets were drawn together, pulled from across the galaxy. Commanders were promised riches and glory if they returned with Earth's ashes in their wake. The operation was simple: find the human fleet, trap it, and annihilate it in a single decisive battle that would erase the shame of the Empire's defeats. The humans knew this day would come. Their commanders had long predicted that the Empire would finally bring its full fury upon them. They had prepared for it, but preparation did not erase fear. Their fleet was still small, their numbers still fragile compared to the ocean of ships the Empire could call upon. And when the day came, when Imperial fleets converged on the edge of human-controlled space, the scale of what they faced shook even the bravest hearts. The battle that followed was the bloodiest the humans had ever fought. It began in the empty void around the gas giant Veora, where the human fleet lay hidden among the swirling storms. The Empire had sent more than 2,000 ships, an armada large enough to blot out the stars. The humans had less than 50. The odds were hopeless. But hopelessness was nothing new to them. The Imperials came with arrogance, certain this battle would end differently from the others. At first, it seemed they were right. Human ships were forced back, surrounded on all sides, their defenses strained under wave after wave of fire. Hulls cracked, shields failed, and crews screamed as compartments vented into the cold. The Empire believed victory was within its grasp. But then the humans struck back. They had prepared traps within Veora's storms, mines hidden in the swirling gas, automated drones waiting in silence until the moment came. As the Empire pressed deeper into the system, the traps ignited. Explosions tore through formations. Entire squadrons vanished in fire before they even realized they were under attack. The human fleet surged from the storms with ruthless precision, targeting command ships and fuel carriers first. Each strike weakened the vast armada, cutting at its heart while ignoring its strength. The battle raged for hours. Human ships were torn apart, one by one, yet they refused to retreat. Every loss bought time, every sacrifice carried purpose. They fought not for victory alone, but to send a message, that even when cornered, even when hopelessly outnumbered, humanity would not break. In the end, both sides were shattered. The Empire had lost more than 500 ships, their wreckage littering the void like burning stars. The human fleet had survived, but only barely. Nearly half their vessels were gone, their crews dead or wounded, their weapons exhausted. And yet, as smoke and fire drifted through the silence, one truth remained undeniable: the Empire had failed to crush them. The humans still stood. When word of the battle spread, the galaxy trembled. If a tiny human fleet could fight thousands and still endure, then perhaps the Empire could be beaten after all. Rebellions erupted like never before, fueled by the fire of hope. Entire sectors slipped from Imperial control. On the world of Carthys, an entire garrison surrendered without a fight when rebels invoked the name of humanity. On the colonies of Velos, enslaved species declared independence, openly aligning themselves with Earth. The Emperor raged, but he could not silence the truth. His fleets had failed again. His empire was cracking. For the first time, the galaxy did not look to him as the center of power. They looked to humanity. And humanity, battered but unbroken, looked forward with grim determination. They had survived the bloodiest battle yet, but they knew this was only the beginning. The Emperor would not stop. His fury would grow. His armada would come again, larger and more desperate. The galaxy would witness a final war, one that would decide the fate of all. As the fires of rebellion spread and the Empire trembled under the weight of its own fear, the humans whispered among themselves a single promise: if we must fall, we will fall as giants. And if we stand, the galaxy will stand with us. The galaxy held its breath. 4 years, whispers of rebellion had grown louder, embers of defiance spreading from world to world. And at the heart of it all, a single truth burned brighter than any star: humanity still stood. They had faced the endless tide of the Empire, endured the hammer of fleets beyond counting, and though battered and scarred, they had not broken. That defiance had become a beacon, a light in the darkness. Now, that light would be tested one final time. The Emperor had gathered everything. Every remaining fleet, every warship, every soldier who could be pulled from distant fronts. The Grand Armada stretched across the void like a sea of fire, so vast it seemed to swallow entire star systems. It was more than a battle fleet, it was the full wrath of an empire. The Emperor himself stood aboard the Imperial flagship, a vessel so massive that even moons seemed small beside it. His voice carried across encrypted channels, promising victory, vengeance, and the destruction of the human plague that had poisoned his reign. Against that ocean of power stood the last human fleet. Barely more than 24 ships, many scarred from battles past, patched with hurried repairs, their weapons worn from constant use. Yet every crew aboard those vessels carried the same fire, the same defiance that had brought them this far. They did not speak of survival. They spoke of meaning. They knew the odds. They knew this battle could end their existence. But if they were to fall, they would fall in a way that the galaxy would never forget. The battlefield was chosen, the dying star of Zyros, a system whose unstable gravity well was as dangerous as any weapon. The humans had lured the Empire there, knowing the environment itself could be turned into a weapon. Black holes tugged at the edges of space, solar storms crackled like oceans of fire, and the remnants of shattered moons orbited in chaotic fragments. It was a graveyard of worlds, and now it would become the graveyard of empires. When the fleets met, the void ignited. The Empire surged forward like a tidal wave, thousands of ships unleashing a storm of firepower that lit the system brighter than the star itself. Human ships vanished under the onslaught, hulls splitting open, crews lost in an instant. Yet the survivors did not scatter. They dove straight into the chaos, weaving through asteroid fields, drawing Imperial squadrons into the heart of the unstable system. The humans had prepared traps on a scale greater than ever before. Warheads buried in asteroid fragments detonated, ripping apart formations. Energy mines hidden in the solar storms ignited with devastating fury. The humans fought not with strength but with cunning, every move designed to bleed the vast armada, to cut at its heart while avoiding its claws. And slowly, impossibly, the tide began to shift. Still, the cost was terrible. Human ships fell one by one, their captains choosing to ram Imperial vessels when weapons failed, their crews sacrificing themselves to buy moments of advantage. Entire squadrons were wiped away, but every loss dragged more of the enemy down with them. The void became a storm of wreckage, burning ships and shattered lives spinning endlessly through the darkness. And then, in the heart of the battle, came the moment the galaxy would never forget. The Imperial flagship, the symbol of the Emperor's eternal reign, had been drawn too deep into the gravity well of Zyros's dying star. Its shields flickered, weakened by repeated strikes. Its engines strained as the black holes tightened around it. And there, the last remaining human battleship, its hull cracked, its weapons almost spent, made its final charge. The captain gave no speech, no farewell. The ship's engines flared, and with a roar across comms, it hurled itself into the Imperial flagship. The impact shook the void, a collision of titans that ripped through both vessels. The Emperor's ship cracked open, flames spilling into the void. The human battleship was obliterated, but in its sacrifice, it had done the impossible. The Emperor's throne had fallen. For a moment, silence reigned. Then the Empire broke. Fleets that had sworn eternal loyalty faltered. Commanders hesitated. Soldiers who had once fought with blind obedience now found themselves leaderless, their faith shattered. Rebellions across the galaxy seized the moment. Entire sectors erupted in open revolt. Planetary governors declared independence. Armies turned their guns not on rebels, but on each other. The fall of the Emperor was not just the fall of a man, it was the fall of an idea, the illusion that the Empire was eternal. With its heart torn out, the vast machine collapsed under its own weight. Worlds that had lived in chains for centuries tore those chains apart. Species that had known nothing but fear stood tall again. The galaxy, once bound by one ruler's shadow, was suddenly free to breathe. As the wreckage of the final battle drifted in the void, the surviving humans gathered what remained of their fleet. Barely a handful of ships remained, their crews exhausted, their weapons empty, their dead uncountable. Yet they had done it. Against all odds, they had faced the might of an empire and broken it. Their survival was not just their own, It was a gift to the galaxy. A promise that even the smallest spark could burn down the largest empire. Across the stars, the legend of humanity spread. Songs were sung of their defiance, stories told of their final stand at Zyros. Rebellions carried their banners, children whispered their names. They were no longer just a race from a forgotten world. They were the symbol of freedom itself. And as the galaxy rebuilt, scarred but unshackled, one truth was whispered again and again. A tiny human fleet had stood against a galactic empire, and the universe was never the same.